I'd like to call this meeting of the Clay County Commission to order. We will begin with our invocation by our administrator, Tom Salisbury. Please proceed.
Please pray with me. Father, we ask your presence in this meeting today. We ask that you give each of us empathy, compassion, and discernment as we go about the business, the very necessary business of the County of Clay. We ask this all in Jesus' blessed name. Amen.
Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Nolby?
Here.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Here.
And Commissioner Thompson?
Here.
Approval of the agenda. Are there, if there's a motion, certainly entertained at this point.
I'll move that we approve today's agenda.
Motion has been made for the approval of the agenda. Discussion. Are there any additions, deletions, or any other discussion on the agenda? Commissioner Thompson?
Nope.
Very well. If you're ready to close, Commissioner,
Close.
please call the roll.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
By the way, something I did not mention at the top of our meeting is, and I'll keep mentioning it until we kind of get used to the pattern, that is the presiding commissioner does not vote except in specific circumstances. So when I'm not voting on these things, it's not a function of my either agreement or disagreement. It is a feature of the new Constitution that we find ourselves under. Also, when people come to speak and to address the commission, please make sure the green light is on your microphone and identify yourself. Try to speak clearly. The masks do make it more difficult. Thank you for that little aside. Meeting schedule. We have not yet scheduled our next meeting, but Mr. Administrator, I anticipate that would be sometime next week. Would that be correct?
Yes, that's a fair expectation.
Thank you. Honorary resolutions, there are none listed. Public hearings, no public hearings are listed. That brings us to the commission session. Our first order of business is 2021 Ordinance 6. Mr. Administrator.
Commissioners, this is 2021 Ordinance 6, action submitted by the commission for your consideration and vote.
If I may, this is actually something that...
Yeah, go ahead and identify yourself.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Kevin Graham, County Councilor. This is a request that I made. So this will allow, just to make sure that under the Constitution there are no inconsistencies with the ability to vote. So this is a housekeeping matter in my mind, and I do expect it will be potentially rescinded when we have a full 7-member commission in 2 years. As I continued to think about this issue, though, it did occur to me.
If you just speak a little more into the microphone.
Sure, I apologize. As I did think about this issue a little bit more, I did want to consider some additional language. Is it not? How's that better? There we go. Okay, sorry. I did think about this a little bit more, and I'm requesting an amendment to this to add, to address the situation of an associate commissioner being absent. So in that instance, if an issue that the associate commissioner really wanted to consider or take up, that there'd be a method for that following their absence. So after that opening sentence, I would request.
Oh, let's go ahead and let's get the issue on the table.
Yes.
And then I will recognize. Yeah, I think that that is certainly going to be in order. So is there a motion to approve 2021 Ordinance 6?
Yeah, I'll make the motion that we approve 2021 6.
Thank you. Motion has been made for the approval of 2021 Ordinance 6. Discussion, I think this would be the right point to go ahead and do your suggested amendment. If I could suggest a method is you would outline what it is you see as the potential changes, and then I would entertain a motion to take up that amendment as you've stated it, assuming a commissioner wants it that way.
Perfect. So my requested amendment, again, it addresses the issue of if an associate commissioner is absent, to kind of create a pathway for that associate commissioner to take up an issue that they would have liked to address that maybe was addressed in their absence. And so here's my proposed language. This, again, would follow immediately after the language you already have. And I've got this typed out for anyone, so no one has to write it down if you, the language that would be added is, when an associate commissioner shall be absent from a meeting, the associate commissioner shall be entitled to move for reconsideration of any item voted on during their absence. The motion for reconsideration shall be made at the next county commission meeting at which the associate commissioner is present.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the amendment as outlined by council?
I'll make the motion to adopt county council's amendment.
Motion has been made to amend 2021 Ordinance 6 along the lines just stated by the council, by Commissioner Thompson. Discussion?
Yeah, Commissioner.
Yes, Commissioner Carpenter, please proceed.
So the amendment that we have before us, you've got it in writing, right?
I do.
I'll go ahead and put it
Okay, and so do we have those copies of that distributed?
I've got several, I actually found a typo, so there's, it says when as associate commissioner, so that, what I read was when and, so there's a slight
Okay.
typo there.
Well, because I've already got a question about the original ordinance. And so can you help me understand the change you're making, and then we can get back to the original?
Absolutely. So, hold on. So the change would be, let's say you were absent. In your absence, something was put on an agenda. You take a 2-week trip. In your absence, an issue is put on the agenda that you had a real question about, concern about, interest in, and of course, the other commissioners would not have known that because you're absent. This would give you a pathway to move to reconsider and put that item on the agenda, just so it can be taken up with the full commission. And again, ultimately, the result may be exactly the same, but it does give a pathway for an absent commissioner to take up an item that they had an interest in that the other commissioners would not have known about.
Okay. And so, and it says at the next commission meeting at which the associate commissioner is present.
It has to be at the very next meeting, because again, we don't want
Well,
uncertainty typically.
I agree it should be at the next meeting. So the language that I'm seeing says at the next county commission meeting at which the associate commissioner is present, right?
Yes.
So what if the associate commissioner wasn't present for multiple meetings?
I intend it to be at the next meeting that commissioner is present. If you miss 2 or 3 meetings in a row, it's at the very first meeting that you're back,
Okay.
is the
I
intent.
mean, I can't imagine why that would be abused, but I mean, conceivably,
Sure.
an associate commissioner could come back months later and reconsider under this language.
By the
I'm
way,
sorry.
Commissioner, can I maybe do something that might help clarify that a little? Is later on, we're going to be discussing whether or not we want to change the structure. So if, assuming it's not an emergency type issue, we would have any given item spoken at 2 meetings, so that would be an additional bite. So say you were not at the work session, but you were at the business session. But this is, I think it's a really good way to ensure that everybody has their say in these matters.
So-
Got it. Okay, but there is no limitation in terms of time.
I'm sorry, and I'm having a little bit of trouble because of, I think, a mass, but the limitation is based on when they return. They have one opportunity upon their return to say, hey, we took this up last week. I did want to discuss it. I did have some input or some thoughts on it. I moved to reconsider, and let's take that back up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Thompson?
I feel comfortable with the language in here, so I spoke with county council previously about this, and I feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, I also, the thing is, I had submitted the original ordinance. This amendment, I think, helps to make it stronger, and I do appreciate that because I don't think anybody's going to be terribly shocked to know that I've got a thing about making sure all commissioners have their say in these issues. So anything that strengthens the ability for both a commissioner and the public to be able to weigh in on these issues as we discuss them is important. So I don't want to see anything rammed through in a way that doesn't allow everybody to have their say. With that, Commissioner Thompson, it's your motion, so I'll go for you for close.
I close?
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Thompson,
Yes?
Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
That brings us back to 2021 ordinance, excuse me, 06 as amended. Further discussion?
Yeah, please.
Go ahead.
So, I guess my question is, I understand the concept here. Are there other legislative or governmental bodies that do it this way, in which either an absence, an abstention, or a recusal, so, which is essentially a present vote, is treated as a no vote? Because that's, I certainly don't have an experience with that. So it feels like a pretty new concept to me.
Well, and
Yeah.
this kind of originated with me. I'm happy to explain it. It is, again, addressing a temporary wrinkle in the Constitution. So right now, the Constitution says that the presiding commissioner only votes in a tie. Arguably, it doesn't address the issue of recusal. So if in a three-person body, if one of you was to recuse or just be absent, it's somewhat unclear whether the presiding commissioner then gets to vote to move along the agenda. And so this is an attempt, again, just to make sure that that can happen. So right now, there's an argument to be made that the county commission can't move forward with an agenda if one of the two associate commissioners is absent, because there'd be one commissioner voting, but that doesn't create a tie. It just would potentially not allow the presiding commissioner in that situation to actually move the agenda forward for the commission. So this is an effort to address that so that, again, we're not kind of handcuffed.
Yeah.
And again, it's only a 2-year issue. My suggestion is going to be at the end of this 2-year period, when the full 7-member commission comes online, that this be rescinded.
Sure. Thank you. So right now, if we were to not pass the ordinance and it was a 1-0 vote with one affirmative vote and then one abstention, let's say,
Yep.
what is council's opinion as to what the result of that would be?
Well, there's not a tie at that point, so the question it becomes: can the presiding commissioner cast a vote?
Well, but let's say that the
And
presiding commissioner cannot cast a vote.
then what happens when the county commission does not have essentially a quorum to move forward? That item, or the entire agenda in the case of an absence, then has to be referred to the circuit court for resolution. The circuit court then sits as the county commission on these items. That happens, in the last 10 years, that's happened maybe 2 or 3 times. It doesn't happen often, but it has happened 2 or 3 times. Obviously, again, I would prefer not to have to send an entire agenda down the street to a circuit court judge because somebody went on vacation. So this is, again, it's trying to navigate that little wrinkle that, again, will only last until the full 7-member commission comes online.
Okay. And then just final question on it. Do we have any examples of any other entity in which an abstention is considered a no vote?
I didn't research that. I'll be honest with you, I didn't. Again, the idea was to create it just so it's for purposes of the presiding commissioner being able to move the agenda along and vote. That's how it would operate. But I did not investigate that. Now, again, also my view would be that for purposes of our minutes, a recusal would be noted as a recusal. Not as a no vote, but as a recusal. And then, probably a notation of some type that says, pursuant to commission ordinance, whatever the presiding commissioner voted, and the final vote is this.
All right. Thanks.
Commissioner Thompson, did you have any questions or discussion?
I do not.
One of the things I like about this also is it puts the option in the hands of the absent member. Obviously, there are going to be situations, whether illness or unavoidable circumstance, where a commissioner may not be able to attend a meeting. I think this is a good safeguard against an abuse of that. And it doesn't change a lot as far as if in the case of the presiding being gone, the pro tem still has all of the privileges and authority that was vested in the presiding, so that is untouched by this ordinance. With that, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Carpenter, it was your motion, so I'll go to you for a close.
Thank you. I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes?
Thank you. That brings us to 2021-26, Mr. Administrator.
And just so we're clear, that passed as amended, correct?
Yes, as amended. I didn't mention that, but yeah, it's 2021 ordinance 06 as amended. Thank you for the stipulation. Mr. Administrator.
Commissioners, this is 2021 Resolution 26 to approve the acceptance of grant awards under the Federal Emergency Rental Assistance Program and to establish a separate fund for the placement of those grant awards.
Thank you. This is a commission item. It's one that myself, working with the auditor, had come up with. I think I'd like to go ahead and recognize the auditor so he can maybe make a discussion of what is in this, and then at that point, I would entertain a motion on 2021-26. Please proceed.
Thank you, Commissioner. Victor Hurlbert, Clay County Auditor. Resolution 2021-26 essentially just is in line with historic practice in the county, and we feel consistent with statutes to have the commission authorize the auditor as a county officer to establish a new fund. And these are for federal monies that the county applied for that we could receive and will be planning in the future to use. So this is essentially just giving the auditor authorization to set up the accounting for those monies.
And could you speak to the necessity of making sure the funds are segregated?
Yes, certainly. So this is just as a grant award, we're going to make sure it's going to be heavily audited by our outside audit. It's going to be on our schedule of expenditures, federal awards, so we need to keep it clearly segregated and prevent any commingling of any monies. So we don't really want to use an existing account or fund. So this will make it very clear for us to know and show our outside auditors to be transparent and show where every single dollar went for these monies.
Thank you. Is there a motion on 2021-26?
I'll make the motion to adopt 2021-26.
Motion has been made for the approval of 2021-26. Discussion. This is, I think the auditor may have said, this is related to the Federal Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which is from the Treasury Department of the federal government. Our funds that we will be, I think we actually have received, if the Treasurer, could the Treasurer go ahead and confirm the amount that we have gotten in to put towards this program? Oh, the mic's right there, please.
Yes, members of the commission. Last Friday, we received $3.6 million from the government for that fund.
And with that, we did receive the parameters and the guidance needed to distribute those funds in compliance with federal law.
Those would have went directly to the auditor. All we did was receive the EFT.
Okay. Thank you. With that, is there any discussion on 2021-26? Commissioner Carpenter? No. Commissioner Thompson?
Nope.
Okay. I will just note before we go to a vote, and I'll go to Commissioner Thompson to close here in a moment, that because we're a three-member panel, it is difficult for us to communicate outside of an open meeting. But I will tell you this, that we have reached out to both governmental and private, actually nonprofits, about the compliant distribution of this money and how it works. So there's going to be a number of meetings, there'll be a couple of meetings early next week, and I am sure that the administrator will be able to brief you on those, just to let you know the direction we're going. But we are trying to do our best to exercise the due diligence on both the ability to have people access those funds, and also the ability of the commission and the county government to be able to comply with any reporting requirements related to those funds. So with that, that was Commissioner Thompson's motion. I will go to Commissioner Thompson for any additional comments and close.
I close.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
That brings us to 2021 Ordinance 4A. Mr. Administrator?
Commissioners, 2021 Ordinance 4A pertains to the adoption of the annual budget of Clay County, Missouri for the fiscal year beginning on January the 1st, 2021 and ending on December 31st, 2021, with the exception of all accounts associated with the operations of the Clay County Prosecutor's Office.
Very well. Would you like the budget team to make any comments?
Sure, thank you. I would call on the budget team for any comments pertaining to this ordinance.
Steve Serks for the budget team. We do not have any additional comments associated with this ordinance. Just hope that the commission finds it reasonable and will approve it.
Thank you. Is there a motion on 2021 Ordinance 4A?
I'll make the motion to approve 2021 Ordinance 4A.
Motion has been made for the approval of 2021 Ordinance 4A. Discussion. I just want to say I think the budget team in a short period of time has done a great job. Certainly the associate commissioners have been drinking from a fire hydrant on this one with all the information that's been coming. The administrator is in a likewise position of climbing a very steep learning curve. And I've got to say that the different offices and the departments have been remarkably cooperative. Not that they ever were anything but that, but I believe we have an atmosphere now to where that is being reciprocated from the commission, thanks to our, in no small part, to our new commissioners. With that, if there's no further discussion, I will go to Commissioner Thompson for close.
I would just echo, Jerry, you did, Commissioner Nolte, sorry. I agree completely. I think this has been an interesting process this year for the budget, but I think this is something we can all be very proud of, and we've had a lot of hardworking men and women working on this budget. So they do deserve a big round of applause and maybe some cake when we're all done, so I'll give them that. So, yeah, so that's all I have to say on that.
And I do plan to go to, at the end of the 4 votes that we take, I do plan to do a little attaboy to everybody. But thank you very much. With that, please call the roll.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes?
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
That brings us to 2021 Ordinance 5A. Mr. Administrator?
Commissioners, 2021 Ordinance 5A pertains to the adoption of an appropriation order for the annual budget of Clay County, Missouri for the same fiscal year, January 1, 2021, ending on December 31, 2021, again with the exceptions of all accounts associated with the operations of the Clay County Prosecutor's Office.
Thank you. Any comments from the budget team before we go forward?
Steve Serks on behalf of the budget team. No additional comments at this time, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments? Excuse me, is there a motion related to 2021 Ordinance 5A?
I move that we pass 2021 Ordinance 5A.
Thank you. Motion has been made for the approval of 2021 Ordinance 5A. Discussion? Commissioner Thompson?
Okay.
Also, I neglected to say, I do want to make sure that if there are any comments from any members of the public or any of the other persons present here, certainly feel free to go up to the microphone. I'm afraid I got a little carried away with myself and sort of ran through that. So if there are any comments, please make your way to the microphone and I will recognize you. With that, seeing no further comments, Commissioner Carpenter, any closing comments and to close?
Thank you. I renew my motion. I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes?
That brings us to 2021 Ordinance 4B. Mr. Administrator?
Commissioners, 2021 Ordinance 4B pertains to the adoption of the annual budget for Clay County, Missouri for the fiscal year beginning on January 1, 2021 and ending December 31, 2021. And this is for all accounts associated with the operations of the Clay County Prosecutor's Office. I would ask if anybody from the budget team has any comments on that.
Steve Sirks on behalf of the budget team. We have no additional comments at this time. Thank you.
Very good. Is there a motion related to 2021 ordinance 4B?
I move that the commission approve 2021 ordinance 4B.
Thank you. Motion is made for the adoption of 2021 ordinance 4B. Discussion, Commissioner Thompson?
No.
Are there any comments from office holders or the public? Seeing none. With that, Commissioner Carpenter, we'll go for you to close.
Thank you. I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
I'm going to recuse myself.
Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Oakley?
Yes. Thank you very much. That brings us to 2021 ordinance 5B. Mr. Administrator.
Commissioners, 2021 Ordinance 5B pertains to the adoption of an appropriation order for the annual budget of Clay County, Missouri for the fiscal year again beginning on January 1, 2021 and ending on December 31, 2021. And this is for all accounts associated with the operations of the Clay County Prosecutor's Office. And before I kick it over to the budget team, I would like to add a comment. And I don't want this to entirely sound like piling on, but I don't know that until you sit in on this, you really appreciate what a complex effort this is. Incredible detail. It calls for an enormous amount of attention. It's a significant commitment on the part of the folks that are assigned to the budget team. It's hard. And I would like to add my voice of commendation and appreciation to the budget team for what I would suggest is an enormously great job of creating a budget for Clay County in general for this fiscal year. My hat is off to them and my appreciation as well. Budget team.
Steve Sirks on behalf of the budget team. No additional comments at this time. Thank you.
Is there a motion related to 2021 ordinance 5B?
I move that the commission approve 2021 ordinance 5B.
Motion has been made for the approval of 2021 ordinance 5B. Discussion. I'm going to do a little bit of a variance. I think, Mr. Counselor, if this is okay. I would like to take this opportunity while it's on the table to allow an opportunity for comments on the budget as a whole. I realize that's not quite compliant, but if I have unanimous consent to allow that to go forward, and I believe I do, then I would like to give that opportunity for comments from the commission and from staff on this, and obviously also open it up for office holders and members of the public. With that, I will go to Commissioner Thompson. If you have any comments on the, either on this particular item or on the budget in general.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think I've kind of said it. It's, we have a very fair and balanced budget here, and this was no easy task by any means, but I do think we have some really great people working on it, and it's something we should all be very proud of. And I think, you know, moving forward, hopefully this will become a little easier now that we know that what we're really working with within the county budget. But you guys have done a terrific job, and all of our departments and office holders and your cooperation through this process. I know it's been hard, but you guys have done a really great job, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner Carpenter?
Thank you, Commissioner. So, you know, I too am very proud of the product we have here today. Grateful to everyone, each and every person who played a role in its creation. I think the collaboration was real and it was impressive, and it's definitely a new time for Clay County government. You know, we inherited a multi-million-dollar deficit essentially coming into this budget, and so a lot of tough decisions had to be made. But I'm proud of where we ended up. I think on the policy side, I think restoring a lot of the funding and duties to their traditional rightful place with office holders is a good thing. I think what we did in terms of public safety with the Sheriff's Department is a good thing. And I think, generally speaking, giving the public confidence and faith that these decisions were made in the best interest of the citizens of this county, and putting taxpayer dollars where they need to go based upon need rather than political considerations, which I think had become all too common in the norm in previous years. I think it's a big change. I think it's a good change, and I hope that we've made the citizens proud with what we've done here, and I'll be happy to support and promote it. And thank you again to everybody who helped out, and my fellow commissioners. Thanks.
A comment from the administrator, and then, Mr. Administrator, if you'd like to recognize the budget team for further comments after you've made yours.
My comments are, again, as I said, and frankly, I would just echo Commissioner Carpenter's comments. It's a balanced budget that required an enormous amount of time and effort, and everybody on that team should be commended. And again, I express those commendations to each and every person. In fact, if you don't mind, that would be Benjamin Pedersen, that would be Steve Sirks, who is kind of the head of the team, Kathy Minton, Auditor Victor Hurlbert, and Treasurer Nance are the folks that participated in this and devoted a lot of their time and energy and effort to this. And at that point, I would hand this over to the budget team for any final comments.
Steve Sirks on behalf of the budget team. We did face a difficult challenge this year in the budget in the beginning, and with the expert assistance of all members of the budget team, including Treasurer Nance, Auditor Victor Hurlbert, Kathy Minton, and Michael Reynolds from Finance, as well as Benjamin Pedersen, the Chief Deputy Auditor, we were able to wade through those things and come up with some what we thought were fair and equitable solutions to the budget. We also tried to be as inclusive and transparent as we could in our discussions with the office holders and the department heads. And I think everybody felt fairly good about having a place at the table to say their piece when it came to the budget time involving the commissioners. So as it's been said in a country song, there's no I in team. And so this was truly a team effort, and I certainly appreciate everyone on the budget team and the qualities they brought to the budget team. We could not have done it had we not worked collaboratively as a team. So I appreciate that, and we appreciate the Commission's confidence in our ability to bring the 2021 budget forthwith and its adoption. So thank you for your time and your faith in us.
Thank you. I'd also like to mention that I guess we can still call you Captain Sirks?
As I said before, you can call me whatever you want to, just as long as you call me to dinner.
There you go. Steve came, I think everybody pretty much is aware, he came out of retirement to take on this task. And it was a daunting task, and one that I think many would have shied away from, but he embraced it. And working with our budget team, I think we've come up with a budget that is pretty much the best budget that we could come up with, considering the cards that we were dealt and the position we are in. And even with that consideration taken off the table, I think it's a great budget, even on its own, standing alone as a separate entity without considering the circumstances. The circumstances just make it all the more extraordinary. One of the things that I really liked about what we're doing this time is the expansion of the budget team beyond just the administration. I think the fact that we have two elected officials, that would be Auditor Hurlbert, Treasurer Nance, who came in and lent their expertise, gave a broader and a more holistic view of the county budget and how it is that we serve our constituents. One of the things that I hope is that we are able to expand on not just the ability to fund those things that we need to fund, and in this budget we certainly expanded funding for the Sheriff's Department, which is far overdue. And we have also managed to streamline and reduce our legal fees. I would say that we have saved a considerable amount of money, and certainly in my opinion, we have upgraded the quality of legal representation for the county a substantial amount. And also made other substantial reductions that would be under lobbying. We no longer have a lobbyist firm, which is, I think, a positive thing. So all in all, we've done an awful lot here that really, I think, bodes well. And like I say, my hope is that we can continue the template that we've established at this budget process, including more people in the budget process, a more open, transparent process. And I am looking very much forward to later on this year, and it's not that far away, when we start working on the 2022 budget, that we start building on, I think, the very wonderful start that we've had, and that is to increase transparency and increase the ability for participation for all parties involved, both in government and in the public. So with that, that was, I believe, Commissioner Carpenter's motion, so I will go to Commissioner Carpenter for any closing remarks and to close.
Thank you, Commissioner. I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
I'm going to recuse myself.
Commissioner Nolte?
Yes. That brings us to 2021-07. Mr. Administrator?
Commissioners, 2021 Resolution 7 is to approve the completion and submission of Form 4379, which is a form within the Missouri Department of Revenue, which allows for the request of approved individuals to ask for information regarding local sales tax and use records, a necessary form that allows for that request, and this is just to approve the submission of that request with the proper individuals on that form, 4379.
And my understanding is that this is something that is a reoccurring feature of government, so
Yes,
it's
this is something that's required on an annual basis to continue to do that process.
very well. With that, I would entertain a motion on 2021-07. Oh, go ahead and put the motion on the floor, and then we'll hear from.
I'll make the motion to approve 2021-07.
Motion has been made for the approval of 2021-07 discussion. I see the assessor has come to the microphone, so we will go ahead, if it's okay with the commissioner, and hear from her right now, and then bring it up for discussion for the entire commission. Please proceed.
Okay, Kathy Reinhardt, Clay County Assessor. The assessment department does not, we didn't sign that this year because we don't need the numbers. It's none of our business how much sales tax somebody paid. However, we still need access to the businesses so that we can make sure that they've been assessed accordingly. So I just wanted to make sure that somebody knows that so that they can get us a list. We don't need any revenue numbers. That's why we didn't sign it this year, and besides that, both those people that were supposed to sign it are out sick, so.
And there's, of course, a level of confidentiality in these numbers
If
for,
it can be redacted and sent to us, we'd be thrilled to death.
right. What I'm saying is the numbers are secure for the purposes of the businesses so
Yeah,
that their
privacy.
proprietary information is
Yeah.
not disclosed.
I'll comment to that, Commissioner.
Go ahead and
Victor-
identify yourself, please, for the recording.
Certainly. Victor Hurlbert, Clay County Auditor. Yes,
Proceed.
Assessor Reinhardt, we're happy to help you get that information along with the Finance Department and Administrator. We'll get you whatever you need.
Very good. Further discussion. Commissioner Carpenter, did you have any questions or comments?
Nope.
Commissioner Thompson, are there any other comments from the, let me go back a step. Are there any other comments from office holders, from the public, or anyone else present? Mr. Counselor.
I do have a comment. So I'm reading through this. I'm going to suggest an amendment to the ordinance. The last sentence says, "Any commissioner voting in the majority is authorized to sign any documents to facilitate this order." I would request that that be changed to any commissioner voting in the majority or the presiding commissioner is authorized to sign any documents to facilitate this order. And generally speaking, I think that's something we should do for almost all ordinances. And specifically, this document, as I read it, appears to require the chief executive of the county to sign the application. So I would hate to see a mistake happen on getting this through because the wrong person signed.
Okay. So the suggestion is, the recommendation has been made by County Council to make a modification and amendment to 2021-07. Is there a motion? And perhaps if you could state the language as we wait for a motion, if you could state the language a little more specifically. My understanding is what you're saying is on line 3, after the word majority, you would want to insert "or the presiding commissioner,"
Correct.
and probably a comma. I don't know if we need to be that specific about it. Is there a motion to amend 2021-07 along the lines stated by the county councilor?
Sure, I'll make that motion.
Motion has been made. Go ahead, I'm sorry. Motion is, oh, go ahead and make your amendment. I need to recognize after that.
You want to move to discussion on the amendment, or you want me to restate the amendment?
No, okay, let me back that up a little bit. I'm sorry, I got a little off track. So, motion has been made to amend 2021-07 by Commissioner Carpenter. Please proceed.
Very good. So in terms of discussion, what is the, it seems to me that the original language is probably common language that's been used before with regard to commissioners voting in the affirmative.
That's correct.
And so help me understand what the reasoning behind that traditionally has been.
Well, I'll say, I don't think, it's been, at least a few years, it's been the case. I don't think it was the case when you first were elected.
No. No, it was not. I shouldn't just shake my head with the recordings going on, but no, it is recent.
Yeah, so usually, it used to say, the presiding commissioner, shall sign. That's all it said. And then, over the past few years, I think there was an effort to take that role away, and insert this language.
So why even, if I could, why even keep the new language? Why not return to either giving it its traditional language with having the presiding commissioner do it, or just remove the language altogether and have it be any commissioner? And the reason I ask is if we do this amendment, basically what we're going to be stating is that you can either have voted in the affirmative or you can be the presiding commissioner, who could presumably be opposed to the thing, and still sign it. But if it were a situation where it was a 2-to-1 vote for whatever reason, and you were the no vote as the associate commissioner, you wouldn't be eligible to sign. And I guess I'm just not clear as to what the purpose would be of doing it that way.
I think I understand the historic purpose of why this language is inserted. I think I agree with you that I don't like this language. I think going forward, and maybe it's something we talk about during discussion, but I think any commissioner should be entitled to assign something. And if they choose to think, that's not something I think I voted for or want to sign, or then any commissioner could sign it. I think this is a little restrictive, and like in this case, arguably would be ineffective, because this form seems to require the chief executive. We can have a discussion about who that actually is, but yeah, I don't like this language, and I've never liked this language, and I think it was done probably in a punitive way at one point in time.
Okay. Well, it doesn't strike me as the most important thing in the world. That being said, we have the opportunity now to just get rid of the language and make it whatever we want, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if the commission wants to do that, I'm certainly in support of language that we all support. So, that's up to y'all, of course. But those are my thoughts.
Commissioner Thompson?
I'm okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think, I think that Commissioner Carpenter puts his finger on something which was put in place with perhaps not the best of motives, and now it's up to us to untangle it. I think this amendment that you've made is necessary for this document just to go forward with the order of the day. But I think you are right, and also the counselor had made mention of that, and that is, while it may not be the most impactful issue we take up, we should probably be thinking in terms of what is our solution going forward, and not have to do this for each and every, you're right, because this would become rather cumbersome, and I think what we need to do is to discuss ways that we actually fix it. The only other thing that I would point out when it says presiding commissioner, that would also apply to the pro tem in the absence of the commissioner, so there is another possibility there, but this does bear more discussion. You're right, Commissioner Carpenter.
Thank you. And just to be clear, it just occurs to me that going forward, if we have these situations again, we can either do it as just the presiding commissioner or have it be all three, one or the other. Otherwise, this sort of hybrid thing seems unnecessarily convoluted.
And my recommendation, if I may, is that it just say any commissioner.
Right.
Because, for example, if you pass something today, and everything's fine, if it's only the presiding commissioner, and the presiding commissioner maybe gets on a plane tomorrow and for 2 weeks, then all of a sudden, nothing can get signed until the presiding commissioner comes back. I think any commissioner should be authorized to sign, and if a specific commissioner is not comfortable on any particular item, then it can kick to the next commissioner or wait for the presiding. But that seems to be by far the simplest approach, that any commissioner may sign.
Agreed.
Mr. Administrator, did you have any thoughts that you'd like to
Yes,
express?
yes, if you don't mind. I'd like to just kind of affirm and agree with the council's advice on this. I did a little bit more reading, as well as the point being made about this last sentence as it's currently written is punitive, I think, and restrictive. And if you go to where the council was referencing under who's supposed to sign this and who's supposed to fill it out, after the reference to the chief executive of the county, then the language even on the document goes on to say if it's a county, this would be the presiding commissioner. That's their language. So along with what the council pointed out as to the voting majority, I think that's completely wrong and inappropriate and should be stricken and reworded. And I would defer to the council as to exactly how it should be reworded, but it definitely refers to chief executive, excuse me, and presiding commissioner.
Thank you. I think because there are different requirements for different actions that we take, some require the presiding commissioner specifically, some are a little less specific. Once again, that underscores Commissioner Carpenter's point that this does bear some discussion for a longer-term solution. But we are where we are at today, so right now we are at the amendment for 2021-07. Any further discussion? I see no one from the public or from the audience here. Commissioner Carpenter, if you'd like to close,
Thank you. I do. I close.
please call the roll.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
That brings us to 2021-07 as amended, and that is Commissioner Thompson's motion. Commissioner Carpenter, do you have anything you want to add?
No, thank you.
Very well. Is there anything to be, is there anybody from the public or from the office holders who would like to make any additional comments? Mr. Administrator, do you have anything? Very well. Commissioner Thompson, any closing comments and close?
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Thank you. That brings us to 2021-23, Mr. Administrator.
Commissioners, excuse me, Resolution 2021-23 is submitted to approve emergency purchases made by the collector in the collector's office, and I believe the collector is in the room to add some narrative to the request.
Please proceed.
Lydia McAvoy, collector. This would just fall squarely within the ordinance language of a public health emergency. As you know, December is a crazy month for the collector, and pretty much probably the assessor is about the only other office holder that is as busy as we are during the month of December. And so in anticipation of very large crowds in areas where that could not be allowed, specifically in Kansas City, we had a plan in place that would have been less of an emergency. Right as we were moving into the emergency management trailer that we had approved in advance, the sheriff's office informed us that they had so much COVID they would not be able to provide us with any support, which is why we went to Star Investigations. The assessor's office suddenly had to close to the public, so that was the signage to let them know. And also due to not having law enforcement support, but rather private support, we had to move to a secondary location, which was Northgate Middle School, so that we didn't cause a traffic jam on a public road. So that also required an extensive amount of signage. And then also, we needed additional outdoor resources, and we didn't want my staff to be in danger physically, so that's why the tent rental. Tents were in short supply citywide because of so many places trying to conduct business outside, and we literally fell into an extremely helpful business, local business that was able, on extremely short notice, to provide us with all the support that we needed. So unfortunately, with most of those purchasing decisions, timing and the ability to fulfill our specific needs had to be the primary concern. And just to clarify, because someone had asked, we're not asking for any reimbursement or anything. We just want to clarify the purchasing law, that we did exceed the $6,000 and that it was on an emergency basis.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion related to 2021-23?
I'll make the motion to approve 2021-23.
Motion has been made. Discussion. Commissioner Carpenter, do you have any questions of the collector?
I do not. It was a good, helpful explanation, and I appreciate it. So, thank you.
Mr. Administrator, did you have any comments that you'd like to express?
None. I think the collector has explained it very well.
Very well. Are there any comment? Okay. Mr. Counselor, you have some comments you'd like to express?
Just for clarification, so under Chapter 50 of the statutes for an emergency purchase, there are requirements we have to meet. We have to declare that it was that there was an emergency. We have to put in the minutes that is declared. We have to identify the reason for the emergency. And in this case, there are several options for that. The two that I think appear to be applicable are the threat to property and a public health emergency, that we wanted to make sure property was safe and secure, and that we were responding to the public's need to be safe during this pandemic and to effectively pay their taxes. So just want to make sure that that is part of the discussion and that will be reflected in the minutes.
Last spring, probably about, I don't know, maybe 10 months ago, I don't have the date, I did sign documents declaring a public emergency. That was mainly related to our ability as a county to access emergency funding from the state and other sources. So would that be something worth noting as we put this together?
That we are probably, is that ongoing? I assume that.
There was no end date.
Okay, yeah.
So I assume at some point, hopefully in the near future, I would declare the public emergency no longer in effect.
Okay.
Very well. Let's see. Comments from the public? I saw none. Very well. Commissioner Thompson, it was your motion, so if you'd like to make any closing comments, and we'll go from there.
Yes, I think the collector did a great job of taking care of the situation, and this did fall under an emergency, and it was handled appropriately from what it seems, and I think this is just a housekeeping matter of just getting the paperwork done and making sure it's all straightened around, and it's a bonus that we were able to use local vendors. I do like being able to support local businesses around the community, so I'll close with that.
Thank you very much. With that, please call the roll.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes?
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
That brings us to the conclusion of our commission session part of the agenda. We now enter into discussion. We have one item. Mr. Administrator?
Commissioners, the item is 2021 ordinance number 1, and it relates to ordinance modifications.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and kick it off. This is an item that I requested to be put on. Several weeks ago, I had put together a suggestion based on how I would recommend that we work as far as our county meetings go. I'm going to go through this in as quick a manner as possible and then open it up for discussion. It is my intention to go ahead and talk about what's in here, what I would anticipate possibly putting in there in addition, and then hear from the other commissioners. I understand that there may well be some suggestions that we take up, so I want to make sure that I allow time for that. It's my intention to then introduce this at the next meeting for consideration and for a vote the meeting after that. When we come to ordinances, especially something so impactful on the way we do our business day to day, I think we need to allow the maximum amount of discussion and thought by the commission and the ability for the public and other interested parties to be able to also do their research and weigh in with their opinions. That said, it starts out talking about work, business, and business sessions. This would be a throwback, so to speak, to the way we used to do business. We would have work sessions in which we would take up items and we would discuss them, but unless they were of immediate importance that it be passed, we would then take them up at a subsequent meeting to give commissioners, the public, and anyone else a chance to really research it, think about it a little bit, and then they would be taken up at work sessions. So this would require that any ordinance that we take up, with the exception of emergencies, to be able to be discussed at the work session and taken up at the business session. That gives everybody at least 2 meetings the opportunity to weigh in and to propose any changes. What I'm hoping is this does cut down on the ability of commissioners or the public or anyone else from being surprised at the last minute by some issue that came up that they didn't feel they were fully ready to discuss. So that's the first part of what is going on. Under this sub 4, I'll be removing voting the absence, abstention, or recusal by an associate commissioner. We have already discussed and passed that, so obviously that no longer has a place there. By the way, when we get to work in business sessions, that anticipates 4 meetings a week. I would like to be able to discuss with both commissioners and the administrator how it is that we might be able to work 2 meetings out of the 4 every month being in the evening to allow greater citizen participation. It's not in here, but that's something I want to put in. Under session agenda, there are some changes I'm going to be making, mostly along the lines that they specified days of the week, and that was when we were meeting pretty much Mondays. I'm going to take that out and just put in more of a time element required, not necessarily a day of the week required, so that it allows us to meet whatever day would be the most convenient for the government and for the citizens we serve. Also, there's some cleanup things. There's on the next paragraph, it says all 3 commissioners. I'm probably going to take that out just so we don't have to change it when we make the transition to the next size commission. I'm going to recommend taking out on the agenda, and this is under 30.24A, we have comments on agenda items. That strikes me as redundant. We need to be in the habit of soliciting comments of those sorts as we take the items up. It seems to me that if we ask for discussions at that point in the agenda, we pretty much already passed it, and we're asking for comments after the fact, which I don't think is in the best interest. So I would take that out in favor of having those comments made at the time the issue is taken up and it's fresh on everybody's mind and prior to a vote being taken. One suggestion that came from staff was to put in a consent agenda. So I'd like to explore that with staff a little bit. Those would be non-controversial items. The idea would be that they could be voted on as a group. They would be non-controversial and ministerial in nature, but we would certainly want to make sure that there was an option for any commissioner to remove something from consent agenda to put it on the regular agenda for the ability to have a more deep discussion. I would also want to add another item in here specific to administrator comments. I think that's constructive. I think as we move into this form of government, I think it enhances the communications with the administrator, and I think it's just a positive thing all the way around. And then the final thing is there's an effective date of December 31 on here that got kind of put on there. We obviously need to make that date more responsive to the timeline that we find ourselves when we take it up. I think that really covers a lot of it. There's some other issues that I would like to take up. I would like us to be able to, for instance, post amendments between the meetings. So when there's a work session, if a commissioner has an amendment they would like to propose to an issue, if it is practical, I would like us to be able to post that in the posting for that subsequent business meetings so that there's the ability to consider that, especially if the amendment ends up being something a little bit more impactful and more complicated. So that's really what I'm proposing. I'm sure that there's going to be good comment and input from the commissioners. I've asked staff to be looking at this so that they can make whatever suggestions they might have. This doesn't have to be the be-all, end-all by any means. But certainly, as many of the things that we want to change as far as the way we conduct our business and conduct our meetings, as many as we can put on here, I think is positive so that we can get everything done and move forward. As I said, my hope is that we could implement this sometime in the month of February, but that depends on how discussion goes and the will of the commission. With that, I'll open it up for further discussion. Does anybody want to start?
Sure thing. Thank you, Commissioner. Obviously, the specific details and then, additions and subtractions, and you talked about changes that you're planning to make. Those discussions are important, and I look forward to being a part of them. That being said, overall, I think the goal is a good one, and I think by and large, the changes you're proposing are smart. And I do think it'll make, I think it'll improve the commission, and look forward to working with you on it. So.
I appreciate that. That's one of the reasons, this will end up taking up 4 meetings. Not that every ordinance has to, but I want to make sure that we do, to the extent humanly possible, make sure that we have all the information and everything from commissioners and the public that would take care of not having to revisit this subject. Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you, Commissioner. I think these are some good things to be adding back in. I know our commission meetings back in the day used to have the 2-part meetings and more of a consent agenda and being able to have conversations and letting the public have a little more input. And I'm really looking forward to getting back to that moving forward. I think this is a great start. I will also think real hard and see if I can come up with anything else we can throw in here, but I think this is getting us in a good place. And I do like the idea of having our meetings, bringing those to the evenings, so citizens can actually attend.
One of the
Be part of
things,
it.
by the way, when we're talking about evening meetings, one of the things that I would like to take into account, and this is an issue that we will be taking up later, and that is the commission participates in a number of boards and commissions outside of this building. With Mark, for instance, Tuesday night I was meeting with the MU Extension. They have evening meetings. So when we start thinking in terms of when we set these meetings up in the evenings, we certainly would want to try to make every effort so that it did not conflict with a standing meeting of a body that we interact with, to make sure that we are there expressing the interests and the views of the county and its citizens. Mr. Administrator?
Well, Mr. Commissioner, fundamentally, I just think that this is a direction that's very worthy to pursue. I think the suggestions you've made merit discussion on their own, and I think the objective here is a very positive one, and I think I would suggest that the commission is very much on the right track, and we're here to make it work. So I suggest you all figure out the format and the process here, and we'll do our best to implement it.
And I do appreciate the fact that we have, I think, the ability to interact, as each commissioner has the ability to interact positively with staff. That is, I think, a feature of our new way of doing business. And certainly, one of the things that I would certainly welcome would be any observation or recommendations from staff, particularly when it comes to the mechanical operations of it. But to tell you the truth, I'm rather wide open. As I said, a member of staff recommended one of the items that is included on this, and I think the more we open the process up to more ideas and more watchful eyes, I think the better we are. There's a comment from the county assessor.
Kathy Reinhardt, Clay County Assessor. 3 things. Is there anything in the discussion about emergencies? I mean, a contingency fund is one thing, but it's like every once in a while, and it doesn't happen often, and maybe it won't happen at all with the fact that y'all are going to meet more than once a month or twice a month. But every once in a while, there's an emergency that comes up, and it's got to be addressed. Is there anything that you're going to put on the agenda for that?
I think I'm going to defer to the council on that, because one of the features of our Constitution is that while the Constitution speaks to a number of issues, we are still under state statute for a number of things, and there are provisions in state statute for emergency meetings. So I think what I do is ask the counselor to comment if he would care to, and certainly to research the idea that if there are some gaps there, that we are able to fill them. What are your thoughts, Mr. Counselor?
Absolutely. There are, this would not limit the ability to hold emergency meetings, and I would certainly advocate for including some language that makes that clear.
Okay.
This says 4 meetings a month. If we need, because of a pandemic. In the past, we've had it for flooding, where we've had to meet more often than that. And so I would advocate for language there. And to be honest, there are also times in December where combined meetings could occur, maybe meet 3 times in a month. So I think those are all possibilities, and I would certainly advocate that this not be so restrictive as to take away that flexibility.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, because from time to time, emergencies do emerge. And also, the other thing is, I would like to make sure that we have the option, if necessary, to be able to meet, if there's emergency and it's not practical to meet in person. I don't think there are any limitations that prevent us from meeting, say, on a conference call, but I would certainly want to make sure that we don't delay reacting in an emergency situation simply because of procedure or protocol. Do you have some further comments?
Yes. We've got $1 gazillion tied up in all this electronics. Is there any way to get the agenda put back up on the wall so we can all see it for those of us that,
I think that's...
just something simple, just asking.
We are, I will go ahead and defer to the administrator on that. That is certainly a facilities-orientated question. Let's see what Mr. Administrator has to say.
Asked and answered.
Okay.
Very good.
And then the third thing I'd like to say is we have trained everybody in Clay County that we have meetings on Monday morning, whether it be 8:30, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, whenever they are. Now, when you've got everybody trained and you decide to change your meetings, you're going to lose your audience. And we have tried for years. Lydia and I tried to open the annex up just on Thursday nights to help the public. And we sat there with nobody coming in for, what, a year, Lydia? We tried that? And everywhere we went, we advertised, we're going to be open at the annex until 6 o'clock. Come on down. It didn't work. So before you start running off and changing your meeting times because you think you're trying to help the public, you've got to get them educated. And you've got over 100 years of everybody being educated Monday morning, Clay County Courthouse. Just saying.
No, I think that's a really good point. And, as we get deeper into the detail of it, a recommendation I think that's very worth discussing is the meetings that we have during the daytime. Perhaps we retain that Monday 10 a.m. meeting time for just the very reason you say, so that we do have people. And then the evenings can be more flexible because nobody's used to evening meetings anyway. So by keeping the Monday 10 a.m. time, that might help to where we don't lose the public as far as following us goes.
People are calling and they're listening to these meetings. They may not, you can listen to this meeting at 10 o'clock at night if you wish in your home. So, at that point, they can reach out to the office holder or reach out to the commission office holders or the new administrator and say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't going to work, or hey, wait a minute, that's a wonderful idea, I'm thrilled to death. I'm just saying, when you start changing your meeting times, you're going to lose a lot of your audience. That's what I've noticed, and Lydia's in agreement, so thank you.
Well, I appreciate your comments, particularly because the underlying point on your comments, I think, is something that we need to remain focused on, and that is what is responsive to the needs of our constituents. And we are all creatures of habit, and I think you're right. That's by keeping that into account, by keeping that in mind, how we best serve the public, I think has got to be foremost in our thoughts. So that's a very good point. Thank you.
Lydia
Madam
McAvoy, Collector, I just wanted to clarify why I was nodding so vigorously. I didn't even realize there was a meeting today because I like to refer to myself as a working office holder. I've actually been sitting at my front counter because we had a COVID outbreak, and so she's correct. And I know your goal is transparency and communication, and it ends up potentially being less transparent because no one knows that there's a meeting. And that was my responsibility to look at email. I'm not excusing that, but I think the public, she's exactly right. Having that regular time would help. I always cleared that time and always made sure that I was available. So just a comment on that as well, that the regular time does help make sure everyone knows when business is going to be conducted. And now that you're streaming it, that does make it even more transparent. But the multiple meetings all over the place have been difficult to track, just saying.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate those comments. Obviously, we're working in budget time. That kind of goes a little out the window, but yeah, I very much look forward to February and more regular, predictable meeting schedule as we go forward, which I have every confidence we will be doing. Further comments from the public or anyone else present here today? Okay, I will just go back around the table one more time. Mr. Counselor, do you have anything to add?
No.
Mr. Administrator? Commissioner Carpenter?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Thompson?
No, thank you.
Well, I think that pretty well concludes the discussion of 2021 Ordinance 1. I look forward to hearing recommendations and the thoughts of anybody who's interested. That brings us to comments on agenda items. Are there any comments from people, from the public, on items that were on today's agenda? I see a gentleman making his way forward. Now, just as a reminder, this is comments on agenda items which are on today's schedule. We will be going, and obviously you are free to comment at both times, but then we will be going to comments on items that are not on the agenda, so you have either option that you would like to exercise or both. So please proceed with that in mind. And mic on? I think it's on red now. There you go.
There we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Jim Oldebecken. Boy, I tell you what, this is an exciting meeting, and it is awesome to see this type of productivity, and it's like drinking from a fire hose. But one thing that caught my eye today had to do with a fiduciary responsibility that we all have as citizens. The funding for rental assistance is very significant. I spent about a year involved with housing and homelessness issues in Kansas City, and there is just a really thin line between the people that do not own their homes, they rent them, and I believe that's in the metro area 48%. So 48% of citizens do not own their homes. And what I learned many things when I was involved in this issue, is that when there is an eviction for any reason, that really is the beginning of homelessness for many people, or substandard accommodations where they live. And so, just to be brief, I would like to say this is a wonderful resource and lifeline for almost half of our population. I think it'd be great for citizens to educate themselves, keep an eye on this money, ensure that there's transparency, ensure that the nonprofits are effective, and that the money goes to the people that can best be served by it. But I think it's great that this support is available. And again, just one other point, the moratorium on evictions is going to end, and that's going to be a dreadful day, especially for those that are that have no control over their circumstances, kids and the elderly. And so I look forward, I'll follow up later. I'd like to be involved in monitoring that process and contributing. Thank you.
And that is a process. Oh, before you leave, did any commissioners have
Sure.
any further questions?
Yeah, I'd just say thanks for the comments. Totally agree. And I'm thrilled that we're getting this money. And I think it's going to do a lot of good to help a lot of people, and absolutely, some oversight by commission and our county administrator, auditor, treasurer to make sure that the money goes to the right place is going to be important. I mean, it's a lot of money too, so we got to make sure we spend it wisely. Thanks.
By the way, something just as a sidebar to that, go ahead and make your way up to the podium. As a sidebar to that, this is not just helpful for the tenants, but many landlords are small business operators, and the ability to be unable to collect rent, no matter how compelling the reason is that rent cannot be paid, still impacts their ability to do business. So I'd just like to make the point that this does not just help those tenants, but it helps the particularly small operators, those small businesses, to weather this particular storm that we are experiencing. Please proceed with your comments.
Kathy Reinhardt, Clay County Assessor. How are people supposed to apply for this?
That is something that we are right now in process for, and I'll go ahead and discuss that if I think that it's okay to do. Next week we will be the administrator and the auditor, Mr. Hurlbert, and in fact our whole group is going to be meeting on Monday with a nonprofit to talk about how that process goes forward, and the day after that, on Tuesday, there will be a presentation on what the mechanism is for actually taking these applications, because it's necessary to harvest a certain amount of information that is required by the federal government. So we are hopefully going to make some headway on that and be able to start distributing funds.
The only reason I ask is because there's a huge domino effect here. I mean, if the renter can't afford to pay, the homeowner can't afford to pay their mortgage, I mean, it has a huge, huge effect on, well, 48% of the population, but the people that necessarily have gone out and bought a house, or gone out and bought a condominium, or gone out and bought an apartment complex, if they've got 48% of the people that are living there that cannot afford the rent, and, you know, A, you can't evict them, and B, what are you supposed to do? Because the mortgage still comes due, late fees still come due. So, I mean, not only are the people that are being evicted victims, the people that own the property are not always the enemy, and they're also victims. So I don't know if some of the landlords that happen to have property are going to be eligible to receive something for their mortgage payments and their late fees. I just don't want one side of the equation to be taken care of and the other side to be ignored. Of course, if you can pay your rent, then obviously the person that owns the property can pay their mortgage. So I just want both sides to be considered, because there's some people that are sitting out here with, and I get to hear it in my office a lot, you know, they have 10 or 15 properties and over half of them aren't paying. So it makes it very difficult for everyone. That, I just want everybody to be aware of that. Thank you.
No, and you're right, to use the figure of 48%, which I assume is pretty accurate. It sounds pretty close to me. It is conceivable that individuals who own, say, a small number of rental properties, if those rents are not being paid, again, for reasons perhaps outside the control of the tenant, they still have to pay their own loan payments, and conceivably could drive them in a position to where they would in fact default on their own mortgages. So I would argue that goes beyond the 48% just cited a few moments ago, and that's something that we need to be looking at this thing. I think in many discussions that we have, we need to be looking at not trying to identifying somebody as the enemy or the adversary, but understanding that we are all trying to get through this thing.
Victim is what I'm saying, and not just the person that can't afford the rent.
Right.
Everybody becomes a victim, and it's a huge domino effect, and the last thing we want are a bunch of foreclosures in our state.
And that's
the
what,
last thing you want.
and I think we're all, on this panel certainly, appreciative of the fact that we have the option to be able to do something constructive on that line. We've kind of opened that up, so I just want to make sure if there's anything commissioners have to say or any thoughts they want to express or questions, they have the opportunity. Okay. Are there any other comments on items in our agenda? We'll go ahead and jump on down to office holders. Commissioner, well, we've already kind of gone there, so Commissioner Hurlburt. Excuse me, Auditor Hurlburt. I don't know if I promoted you or demoted you. We'll see.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, Victor Hurlburt, Clay County Auditor. I just want to piggyback on those comments about the rental assistance program. As Commissioner Nolde and expressed, this was a very quick timeline that we learned of from the HEROES Act, the second stimulus at the end of the year from the federal government that kind of came down the pipeline. We really had a matter of days, not even that, to make applications as qualifying for having over 200,000 citizens. Is what made us eligible. So we have other partners in our metro we're working with to have a cohesive plan. I'll throw out there that we're working out the timeline for sure with the Minister and Commission. But one thing I just want to add is that this is the way it was written. We're talking about Clay County residents outside of Kansas City. So Kansas City will be using their dollars for Clay County residents who are also Kansas City residents. So I just think that's an important thing to remember going forward.
And that's what thank you for mentioning that, Mr. Auditor, because there are a number of details to be worked out, and that is one of them, and that is We certainly want to avoid duplication of benefits being awarded, not just because it's a waste of money, but if we give one family 2 benefits, that means there's one family who will not receive those benefits. So we certainly want to make sure that the distribution follows the idea of fairness to the highest degree possible. And by the way, I appreciate you bringing up the short notice of this. I would like to make sure that the associate commissioners understand that this is something that came up quickly and required rather rapid action, but I do want to make sure that, excuse me, that they are as much in the loop as possible, especially working through that's why the administrator's role is so important, apart from the obvious, is it gives him the opportunity to keep all parties updated, and I'm sure he will do a great job of that. Any other comments on items on our agenda? Very well. And instead of going out and doing each and every one, although we will start with the public, I would ask for any comments on non-agenda items. We'll start with the public, and then from there we will open it up to commissioners, office holders, and other agencies. But I'd like to make sure the public has first bite at the apple. So are there any members of the public who would like to comment on non-agenda items? That is to say, items not taken up at today's meeting. Okay, I see no one from the public. I do have something that I would like to comment on. Under the terms of our Constitution, and I'd stated my intention to doing this at a previous meeting, it is not just, I don't know if I'd say required, but certainly advisable, and I think a good idea to make sure that our position of the newly created position of presiding commissioner pro tem is filled. When I had brought this up previously, I had mentioned that my intention was to name Megan Thompson, Eastern Commissioner, as the presiding commissioner pro tem. That would be for the balance of this calendar year. At the end of that time, it is my intention to name Western Commissioner Carpenter as the commissioner pro tem for 2022, and from there we will, we'll go from there. But I have submitted paperwork to the documentation to the clerk's office to put that into effect, and I want to give Commissioner Thompson a copy of that document so she has that. And I want to thank her very much for being willing to step into that role. Further comments? All right. Seeing none, let me move my papers around here a little bit. Approval of minutes of previous sessions. There are no minutes submitted to be approved. Written reports. We have one set of written reports. I believe the clerk has those. Could you go ahead and read off what has been submitted?
It's from the Recorder of Deeds, and it's their year-end of 2020 sale, or the receipts for year-end of 2020. And I would also like to say we have updated and changed the way we are doing our written reports, which I believe.
Could you speak a little bit more into the mic? Thank you.
We have changed, the clerk's office has changed the way we are doing or handing out our written reports. Instead of everybody getting them separately, we are now since we're all in this together, I'm working with a person in on the county administrator side we're going to put these in your packet from now on. So you will have them at the same time every week, and if there's any questions at that time, you can always, it'll give you plenty of time to look them over and have any questions or talk to whoever regarding the written reports. But they are going to be handed out in packets, and I thought that was a really good idea, and Brandy is excellent to work with, and I think this is going to be a really good change for everybody. Thank you.
I appreciate that from the clerk's office, because the thing is, not everything we do to enhance transparency is going to be a huge idea. There are a lot of efforts that are just made from procedural things that are also very important that we do. So the idea that everybody is thinking in terms of whatever they can do to enhance the transparency and the ability for citizens to be able to observe their government is certainly appreciated. So thank you to the clerk's office for making that change. I think it's something that is a positive thing. I will see if there'd be any comments on really written reports. Did everybody get those reports? Commissioner Thompson? Okay, the reports have been received. That brings us to executive sessions. There are none listed on today's agenda. Therefore, that brings us to recess and adjournment. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be probably good for me to have. I agree. Ten tomorrow. I know of him, I think. So, yeah. And Tricia called me.